episode of Dragon Ball Super, Gohan returns as the Great Saiyaman. Not to save the day from evil criminals, but because they're making a live-action Great Saiyaman movie. It can't be any worse than this. Besides, they're probably gonna whitewash the entire movie anyway. To my understanding, a lot of Dragon Ball fans really don't like the Great Saiyaman all that much. Personally, I get a kick out of the fact that Gohan loves playing the role of the superhero, and this week's episode was honestly kind of fun, not only because they're poking fun at the whole Great Saiyaman thing, but apparently there's a brand new alien threat on the rise. The episode opens up with the return of Jacko the Galactic Patrolman, who's having ramen in space. Just like Space Dandy. The only difference being that, unlike Space Dandy, it doesn't really feel like an acid trip in this episode. But Jacko has certainly earned his space noodles because he has captured this rare creature which is known as a Wadagosh, which is basically this little white tentacled creature with a dealy bobber on top. And it has the ability to essentially take control of people and transform them into big, powerful, destructive monsters. And of course, it escapes from Jacko, goes to Earth to cause all sorts of shenanigans. And while all of this is going on, Mr. Satan is getting ready to make his big screen debut with the Great Saiyaman versus Mr. Satan. Because the secret identity of the Great Saiyaman is not known to the public, they can pretty much cast anyone they want for the role, and they've decided to cast this actor by the name of Barry Kahn. Eagle-eyed viewers will probably notice that Barry Kahn actually already appeared in a previous episode of Dragon Ball Z. He didn't have a speaking role, but I thought this callback was really funny. It happened during the Majin Buu arc, when Buu was still his big, fat, happy, jolly self. There was that scene where he was confronted by that woman and he was trying to impress her, and he found this magazine, which just so happened to have Barry Kahn on the cover. This is when Majin Buu decided to transform his face into Barry Kahn and completely freak out this woman before transforming into her a piece of candy and eating her alive. The more I talk about Dragon Ball out loud, the more weird I realize it really is. And big shock, Barry Kahn just so happens to be the king of the douchebags. This is a guy who is completely in love with himself, and he also happens to be a very hard-to-work-with actor. He actually ends up firing his very first stuntman because he won't do something that endangers his life, and that's when Gohan decides to step up to the plate and don the Great Saiyaman suit again, completely impressing everyone on the set, including the director, who seems to have the same voice actor as Nekamamushi from One Piece, so that's pretty awesome. Because this is Dragon Ball Super, we do get a little bit of action in this episode. There's a scene where there are these two robbers who are trying to get away with all of this dough, and they're being confronted by Krillin, who's honestly really cool in this episode. That is until Great Saiyaman comes in and steals all of his glory, and he's able to take out these guys pretty quickly. But what happens is one of these guys ends up getting their body taken over by that weird little alien known as the Wadagosh, which has made its way to Earth. And you can tell that he's been taken over because he has creepy red eyes, his body gets all pumped up, and he has the little dealy bobber on top of his head. However, everyone and their mom was able to see this. He got caught on camera a lot, and everybody knows that the Great Saiyaman has returned. And when he returns back to the movie set, everybody pretty much knows that it was him. And Bulma tries to cover it up a little bit, but unfortunately she ends up letting slip the identity of the Great Saiyaman, which another one of the actors in the movies ends up paying attention to. Her name is Koko Amaguri, who's basically just a stereotypical Japanese idol. But because she knows that Gohan is the Great Saiyaman, she's going to take advantage of this. And I honestly thought it was going to go in the direction of her trying to blackmail Gohan, but really she just wanted to pull a Lois Lane in Superman. She just wanted to fly around the city, and that's exactly what she does. If Videl saw this, she would probably punch her right in the ovaries. Speaking of which, I thought it was really funny that Videl was totally grooving on the fact that Gohan was coming back as the Great Saiyaman. Someone's ass get laid tonight! The episode ends with Gohan as the Great Saiyaman giving Koko a ride through the air when suddenly they're confronted by Jacko and his UFO. And Jacko feels that Gohan is being controlled by the Wadagosh and decides to fire a massive alien blaster right into his face. Will Gohan survive? Of course he freaking will! Just look at the preview for the next episode. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Dragon Ball Super? Going into this week's episode, I was expecting the worst. I thought this was going to be an absolutely terrible episode of Dragon Ball Z, which is just going to be about all these goofy scenes of Gohan working on this movie set. And while there were a lot of scenes like that, the fact that they're adding in the element of this alien which can take over people's bodies is honestly kind of cool. And the preview for the next episode is guaranteeing that we're going to see some sort of weird, freaky alien monster fighting against Gohan. So at least that's going to lead to something cool, and hell, at least Gohan gets to freaking do something! Barry Kahn is an absolute douchebag, but I really like his voice actor. I don't know the name of the Japanese voice actor, but I've heard this guy like a million times before. If somebody could point that out to me in the comments section below, I'd really appreciate it. He adds a great layer of douchebaggery to this guy. I mean, he's just the character you just love to hate. I can't wait to see him eventually get his comeuppance in the next episode. Spoiler alert, it looks like he's going to be taken over by the Watagosh, and he might actually be what transforms into that weird, freaky blue alien creature that you see in the preview, which they only show in a few, like, split-second images, but if you freeze frame it, you can totally see this thing in action, and it pretty much just looks kind of like your standard, freaky, Akira Toriyama-designed alien monster, which is to say it looks big and bulky and kind of badass at the same time. But I can't wait to see how Gohan's going to be able to take this thing out, or if he's going to try and capture it for Jacko again. I like the fact that he's even getting involved, but really, this episode was all about the return of the Great Saiyaman. Whether you love him or whether you hate him, it'll definitely at least bring out a couple of laughs in the viewer, and you'll get to spend some time with some more of the side characters of the Dragon Ball universe. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's good, solid entertainment. And if anything, it's the perfect complement, because this week on Toonami, we got our very first premiere of Dragon Ball Super, the very first episode, the beginning of the Battle of Gods arc, so clearly it's a good time to be a Dragon Ball fan. Make sure to support that show and watch Toonami. They air it early at 8, and then later on at 11:30. They're making sure that people are going to be able to know that this show is on TV and that you should watch it, because Dragon Ball Super has a lot of promise for the future, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do with that. But before we get to the next major arc in the series, we have a couple more of these goofy episodes to get through, so let's just kick back, relax, and enjoy them. So, I found myself really liking this episode, even though I just thought it was going to be absolutely terrible. So, I'm going to give this episode right here a solid 4 out of 5. For the most part, I really liked it. There were a few moments where the animation and the artwork looked kind of but that's pretty standard for the series, and I would have liked to spend more time with the Great Saiyaman himself, and it sort of ended, like, abruptly. I didn't see it going down that way. I want to learn more about the Watagosh, but we're going to get more of that in the next episode, so let's stay tuned. But you heard my thoughts about this week's episode. I want to hear from you guys. Tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Dragon Ball Super. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you a big fan of the Great Saiyaman, or do you think he's just as embarrassing as everybody else thinks he is? What's the deal with this Watagosh monster? What do you want to see from his big battle with Gohan in the future of Dragon Ball Super? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching this review. I really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like this review, hit that like button. It's really easy to do and it helps us out a lot. And please leave me a comment or two. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the episode. I will see you guys next time. And as always, stay dandy, baby.